So, esteemed delegates, I'm glad to greet you. The perspectives of the development of the SME in Ukraine in little steps to the results. So, any country of the world is trying to get sustainable economic development, and Ukraine is not an exclusion because Ukraine faces the challenges. They are rather substantial. They're both political and social and economical and international challenges. We've got lots of tasks which we need to overcome. So we can see that SME is one of the key drivers which can overcome the above-mentioned problems. Because SMEs are always the key component of the economy of any country. If we look at their developed economies, then those are OECD countries. Approximately 70% of the working places are provided by SMEs. In the countries which are developing, this is approximately 30%, and if we include informal economy, it may include 50%. So what's going on in Ukraine? In Ukraine we see that in SMEs we've involved approximately 4 million of people, and part of GDP which they create is more than 20%, which is not enough. My data may be added by the representatives who would join us later, but they will answer in the same terms with the same indicators. So why SME is so important? We may speak in hours about that. I will focus upon several facts. First of all, competition. The SME can create goods and services which are cheaper, more cost efficient, and of better quality. In this way, they help the bigger corporations, how they improve their work. Secondly, this is diversification. SMEs are rather flexible. They can create innovative products and they can follow the latest world tendencies. What's important, the resistance of SMEs. We are living in the times of the economic crisis. Since 2008 and after that, we could not get off our knees because Ukraine is a raw material country still. We are selling raw materials, grain and our other products, the products which don't have high value added. But during world crisis, these are the countries which are suffering most of all. That is why we need to create value added in our country, and SMEs have much higher level of resistance for such phenomenon. That's why it's important. What else is important? Flexibility and improvement of SMEs. What do I mean? When then a small enterprise is created with a certain idea and it has never become efficient, it has been closed. Is it good or bad phenomenon? On the one hand, of course, it's not pleasant. On the other hand, if the smaller enterprise is closed, it can rethink its strategy, rethink its approaches, and come to the market with new products, new campaign. During the shorter period of time, they can implement the new product or services for the market. But can the SMEs exist in the system of inefficient regulatory policy or not that perfect? Of course not, and we can see in the economic indicators that there is the problem, not only of the regulatory, but also the lack of access to the funding, financing, sometimes incomprehensibleness of how to work with the foreign partners, how to be included into the international networks of export, innovative ones. Those are the questions which the country, the state has to deal with, and not only the state, but the expert community. That's why we gathered here. I thank all of the experts and the representatives of the state officials who came here and will try to help the development of the SMEs in Ukraine. Программу можно мне, пожалуйста? And the regulatory policy is of course diversified, but we would like to pay attention to the 3 points. Программу сегодняшнего дня. The first one is taxes and customs. So that is why we'll listen to 3 presentations on those issues, and then we'll speak about the positive experience and international organizations in the support of Ukraine. The first speaker is Mr. Direntiev, who is the head of Anti-Monopoly Committee, but he had to leave to a very important meeting in Paris. This is the OECD countries meeting, and this is the economic competition of the whole world. So, taking into account the importance of this event, Mr. Terentiev will be live from Paris now. And we'd like to give him the floor and to listen to the vision of the Anti-Monopoly Committee. We know how you reform the authority, how you try to reform the competitive policy. This is not the role of Anti-Monopoly Committee only, but all of the state bodies of the central executive branch. I'd like to hear how you see the further reforms of the competitive strategy in Ukraine from the point of view of the support of SMEs. So please, Yuri Alexandrovich, the floor is yours. Good day. Good day, esteemed participants. I thank you for the introduction. The Anti-Monopoly Committee of Ukraine is the authority body with a special status, the main task of which is to develop, to protect competition, mostly finding out and stopping abuse. So the main task of the Anti-Monopoly Committee is to take decisions about the violations which can harm interests of the economic subjects, but mostly just to fight the consequences of the violations with certain distortions about the regulatory base or the activities of the subjects we deal with. Monopoly state of the state officials is not the most efficient way to use resources. That is why the Anti-Monopoly Committee pays more attention to improve effectiveness with the growth and blockage of competition. SME take in the developed countries of Europe the huge part, and the development of the economy, the economic growth, is not only the big transnational corporations. The experience of Germany witnesses that, in fact, the economic growth can be achieved developing the SMEs in a very efficient way. From the practical point of view, if we look at the measures, those actions which the Anti-Monopoly Committee does, and those systematic things which we are doing and accomplishing to develop competition, which helps the small and medium enterprises, we may mention the certain systematic issues. Last year, we finalized the first part of the common project with the World Bank, and as an outcome, we've prepared about you, the main problems of the development of the markets in Ukraine, and unfortunately, I may state that the majority of issues connected with the restrictions and opportunities of the subjects to compete, with an opportunity of the subjects to implement the investment activities, the economic activity, they are connected with an inefficient participants of the state enterprises in the economic processes. And also, we have defined that mostly the legislation which is regulating the natural monopolies is not efficient and does not create conditions which prevent the abuses and violations by the subjects of natural monopolies. So this systematic problematics is reflected in the activities of the institutions. And if we look at the statistical data which we had last year, the biggest number of violations, according to which the Anti-Monopoly Committee had certain decisions, they are about anti-competition actions of the authority. And this is almost 500 of those violations. The vast majority of those violations are connected with the harming of the interests of the subjects of SME. And simultaneously, we see the situation when the committee again has lots of complaints connected with different market power. mostly, as I mentioned, the subjects of natural monopolies and state enterprises. One of the principles of the development of competition and healthy economic policy conduction is the provision of the principle of competitive neutrality, when the state subjects, do not have any specific advantages in comparison with private ones, and the existence of state enterprises, the policy of their activities, is in consent with the requirements, first of all, of sanity, because those requirements and those standards are formed already at playgrounds like OECD. They define the fundamental political requirements for the existence of the state enterprises and presence of the state enterprises in the certain sectors. Last year, the Anti-Monopoly Committee has made several decisions connected with the activities of the state enterprises on discrimination activities. Those are decisions on the case of the state enterprise Artem Salt, SIL, Ukrainian Spirit, Ukrspirt. So those things, these points were based upon the following situations. The discrimination activities of the state enterprise, when in fact, in a non-transparent way, they formulated certain conditions of cooperation with the private subjects, and it created advantages at the markets connected with the activities of the contract partners of the above-mentioned state enterprises. We are also facing a very big number of situations when artificially they create the situations when certain private subjects are getting artificially monopoly states, and especially in the situations connected with the administrative services provision or some of the authorities or quasi-authoritative activities. In fact, now the investigation is ongoing about the activities of the informational system of port community and several other similar cases. Why do I tell you about that? I'd like to illustrate that in the practice of anti-monopoly committee, we do understand that the SMEs are mostly suffering because of the main ways of violations, and we need, as an anti-monopoly committee, to stop that. This is the abuse of the monopoly state, and secondly, the huge practice which is working now about the anti-competition actions of the authorities. There are certain cases of investigations we've conducted recently, but we've got the question arising. If, during the 25 years of our work, and we've updated the Anti-Monopoly Committee 4 years ago, and we've defined the priorities of our work about the provision of the efficiency of the activity of their institution to achieve the highest, the best results with the restricted resources we have. Still, if we look at the number of applications towards the Anti-Monopoly Committee, we can see that an overall number is rather substantial, more than 6,000 different complaints we are getting. The Anti-Monopoly Committee has only 750 employees. So for us to have the most efficient way of implementation of our authorities, without rushing for statistics, but to create the most highly qualified and high quality favorable conditions for the activities of SMEs, first of all, the certain fundamental problems of regulation of economic activities and the presence of the state at the markets need to be solved in a systematic manner, not only with the participants of the Anti-Monopoly Committee as an authority which deals with the law, but mostly with the systematic engagement of ministries, institutions, and the self-governance, local self-governance authorities. to provide the implementation of the tasks of the committee and to take away the preconditions for the violations, and as I mentioned, it was done by the state authorities mostly, the committee has developed the draft of the strategy of the development of competition, which foresees, first of all, synchronization, the consent of the activity of state authorities and local self-governance to the markets which belong to the competency of the central bodies or the regional markets which have the responsibility of the local self-governance, for them to conduct the permanent work to overcome or to avoid obstacles on the way to the access to the markets. What are those obstacles? Those can be not only economic obstacles. First of all, you may say about the regulatory and administrative barriers, which are artificially on the way of the new subjects emerging at the local and national markets and revival of economic life. A separate priority of the national strategy is the provision of the competitive neutrality which I mentioned above, and also the development and use of the tools how to assess the level of interference of the state into the markets. The methodology to provide those measures is developed on the base of the Anti-Monopoly Committee and is implemented into our internal activities. We based upon the basic documents of the OECD for achieving the aim for all of the regulation acts and documents which are given out at the level of the central and local governance authorities, for them not to distort the notion of competition. The separate issue of the national strategy are the transparent rules of the functioning of activities of municipal and state enterprises, which in fact sometimes can have a situation when, using the money of the taxpayer, the subject of an SME, and especially at the level of the local power, they create the subjects in the legal form of the communal enterprises which compete with the private subjects, or which delegate the power authorities, and non-transparently these power authorities are implemented and creates obstacles at the market. I can see that there are two strategic priorities of our work for the next year. From the point of view of systematization of the protection of interests of the subjects of SMEs, on the one hand, this is the further work on the implementation of strategy of the growth of competition. On the other hand, this is the inventarization on the level of the territorial departments, possible violations which are the most painful for the subjects of SMEs. For instance, it can be connected with the networks connection or with the competition for the solid waste disposal, the competition about the organization of transportation by the short buses. To have this systematic picture of several dozens of the main violations, for us to control from the main department the quality of the development of these problematics simultaneously all over the country, and to provide the high-quality assessment of the efficiency of activities of each territorial unit about the protection of the interests of the SMEs first of all. That is why I think that it would be very useful if the roundtable participants would be involved in the creation of the similar inventarization process of the typical problems and issues for the Anti-Monopoly Committee to process and to broadcast these questions to create strategic and operational tasks for the territorial units. In our work, we wish to create the systematic preconditions for the high quality development of the economic environment. We are using the indicator of economic effect of our activity for the systematic strategic planning of our work, and I'm glad to state that during the recent years it increased since the moment we introduced it, from the sum which is equivalent to $50 million, if we look at the foreign currency indicators, up to 150. So it has 4 billion, indicator of 4 billion hryvnia. Well, of course, it's not the limit, the threshold, and the development of SMEs can be that serious, not only push of the development of economic life, but also is, in fact, the main task of the Anti-Monopoly Committee and a very perspective way of work. Thank you. Thank you for your speech. Using an opportunity, if anybody has the quick questions for Mr. Terentiev, because we will disconnect now with him, or maybe in the end you'll have any questions. Thank you for your speech now, and next week we'll begin to give certain proposals about the territorial units and about the system of public procurement and the support of SMEs in this part as well, which is rather important. Thank you for your participants again, and we are waiting for you in Kiev. And the next presentation is created to review the highest priority issues in the customs policy. I'm giving the floor to Mr. Anatoly Makarenko. I'd say he's one of the most authoritative experts in the customs policy in Ukraine, and he has been the head of the customs service for 2 times. Hello, dear friends. I sincerely thank the organizers of the round table for an opportunity to be among those who discuss the extremely important issues, not only for the development of SMEs in Ukraine, but in fact for the development of our country. Because its future as a democratic state, which dreams of its development, is on the shoulders of SMEs exactly. That's definitely. I don't know whether the participants of the round table have anything in common with an external economic activities. I can see some of the familiar faces, but maybe sometimes you have these connections only when you go through the airports, when the customs officers check them. But speaking about these problematics, I'd like to begin with that. The problematic of the customs office and its function as the speeding up factor or the slowing down factor of the trade at the border. A couple of months ago I crossed the border at Borispil airport, and as well as hundreds of passengers, I came to the whole long queue where they had to investigate and look through the luggage of all of the suitcases. Using my former status, I asked the question what was going on, and I know all of them in Borispil, in fact. What was going on? Anatoly Viktorovich, the security service of Ukraine is having a special operation. He's searching for the cell phones which are illegally taken to the territory of Ukraine. I was coming up to the officer of the security service, and I was asking, why did you have these special operations where there are hundreds of people in the queues? And he said, we have the information about the possible illegal channel of illegal cell phones. So, do you have the information about that little child which is crying closer to his father, to this grandmother who doesn't understand what's going on? Or maybe you have the information about the violator who has vile intention. So, using my administrative resource, I managed to stop this situation, which is the shame for the country and for the law enforcement and customs authorities as well. Why did I begin with this example? 2 different approaches. A cell phone, either we stop hundreds of totally innocent people and we blame them that they want to violate the law, or we can make it in a different way. And this is a different example now. In 2008-2009, I'm taking the position of the head of the customs office of Ukraine. And besides all of the certificates I have on my table, one of the certificates is to bring some organizational equipment, the same cell phones. So in December 2008, legally, at the customs territory of Ukraine, there were brought 10,000 of cell phones. According to the data of the trade networks, they sold more than 900,000 in January. That is before the holidays, which is the most active thanks to the gifts and so on. This is the difference of legal input and in fact input on the territory of Ukraine. This is the delta of smuggling. There were two ways, either to go along the way which I mentioned, the citadel, the bastion, whatever you say, those are the different names of those special operations, when you create obstacles for the business. And to find out the one who's to blame, hundreds of people are suffering. But we chose a different way. And signing the documents with the Ukrainian Center of Frequencies, we've developed a protocol according to which not a single cell phone which was in the network, I'm not speaking about the passengers and citizens who brought their own cell phones, we couldn't control that, but the cell phones and the flows of deliveries of cell phones into Ukraine could be activated on the territory of Ukraine only after they showed their customs declaration. The Frequency Commission and the Customs Service signed the memorandum with the cell phone operators. I do apologize that I'm taking your time, but this is a very demonstrative example for me. And now, 2008, December, the end of the year, 10,000 of legally brought cell phones on the territory of Ukraine. 2009, December, 862,000 of cell phones which were in the legal segment of the input. So additionally, the state got 564 million hryvnia, which we divide onto the average currency rate, which is approximately $70 million. We multiply it by now, and now we have almost 2 billion hryvnia of income to the state budget from one segment of the market. I do apologize for such a long story, but it is very demonstrative how the customs office can work in different times, and how can the customs office be the tool of the pressure onto the business or the clever moderation of the logistics on the border, the clever facilitation of the trade chains. For today, the situation in the Ukrainian customs is incredibly complicated, and if you work there, you know that. In 2013, they began in fact to ruin the customs, when, for the reforms of the customs, they chose one of the models to combine it with the taxation policy. Tax policy. By the way, different countries have different ways of the reforms of their customs service. In the United States of America, after the tragic, dramatic events of the 11th of September, they decided to combine the customs and the border service. So now they have its one authority, which plays a very incredibly important control and safety function. The Ukrainian customs was taken by the taxation policy. The main function is security, control, and they are not that important. So for today, Alexander, you understand me, the fiscal function is the most important for the customs office. And thank you for the introduction, but I was not only the head of the Customs Office, but now I'm the head of the two committees, the Federation of Employers and the Association of the Taxpayers. So I'm the representatives of the interests of lots of you who are present at this round table. And for me it's incredibly painful to state the fact that the Customs Office in Ukraine has become the first tax because we give more than 50% of addition to the state budget for the taxation. I'm not speaking about the National Bank, about transfers, we're speaking only about the taxation. Unfortunately, That's an incredibly complicated picture for us because we are losing the internal taxation of the country. That is why. Showing this picture, I'd like to say that all of my efforts were focused upon the disseminating of this dead hippo, as I said, into two components, the customs and the taxation policy. So now the customs don't in fact exist. In the Ukrainian customs, in 2010, there used to be 18,000 people. Now they have 9,000 of employees. Just for your consideration, in Poland, in 2006 or 5, when they went to European Union, there were 14,000 customs officers, but when the western border was opened, they have 14,000 customs officers who got additional mandates, additional authorities, and they perform other functions in the state. This resource is used. Unfortunately, now we have the situation when maybe some of your acquaintances or you have been the participants of the Europlates long story. I was really ashamed that this story is going on because in 2014 I didn't let them to do that in Ukraine. I don't know whether we do it in the right thing or wrong, but we wanted to make it legal. But then they opened the border. But when one customs officer had thousands, the loads of thousands of declarations about the European plates of the cars, we understood that we just have the lack of the human resource to process this elementary information. So what's happened? Not only the quantitative contents of the customs office is not correspondent to the requirements of the modern times, but the whole current situation. What needs to be done with the quality of the customs administration? What do we need, in my opinion? First of all, the business is interested whether the customs is like the border service or separately or within the administration. I am, as a professional, I understand how should be better, but still how it should be better, but still I'm subjective. But for the business, it's more important for the customs office to work quickly, comprehensively, transparently, and cheap, in all of the sense of those words. Unfortunately, now the customs is working in an opposite way. So for the customs to work quickly, transparently, cheap, and understandable for the business, in my opinion, first of all, it's necessary to minimize the human factor, and we included that into the program of the development of the new customs surface, to decrease the presence of the human being in the decision-making process. Secondly, to increase the E-component. Here we have Oleg Isakovich Platonov. We know each other for a very long time, and he witnessed the situation when lots of years ago he created, and I considered it to be the state important problem, the informational system of porn community. So we convinced the head of the security service and all of the institutions which had something in common to that to sign the common document. So in fact we created the transparent passing of the containers in some of the ports. I know how complicated it used to be, and now I understand him. But I do emphasize, those are the steps which give you an opportunity to bring the products into the transparent segment, and for the business to simplify the conditions. Secondly, for today, we created, and now it's working, the system of risk analysis. You maybe have heard, I've been as a guest at the Finnish customs. And how many freights were considered in 2018? When he said 5%, 5%. And it's too much, he says. How much of freights were taken care in Ukrainian customs? Because sometimes they have to, in Odessa region, they need to look through everything, 100%, with an only aim to find corruption delta. I don't see any protection of interests of the state here. That is why just the risk analysis and selective control. Thirdly, the functioning of the normal, civilized post-audit. The goods have to come to Ukraine as quick as possible and then to catch it up through the legal procedures of the violators. the fourth, the fifth, the 10th, and so on. But to save your time, I'll try to finalize my speech in the following way. It seems to me that tomorrow I'll communicate with the Minister of Finance, Oksana Markarova, that today we have a unique chance to give the Ukrainian customs a European face. We have actively cooperated with the American partners. They gave us the whole roadmap, and unfortunately, the today's government, taken it, couldn't implement anything from it. So I'm really sure that some of the new forces which are trying to rise from their knees in Ukraine, they should understand that for them an SME should be a foundation, and they are facing it. They appeal to it, to the SMEs. It has to see that Ukraine has the customs, not just the bribery, and not the whole turnpike or the boom barrier at the border. I do believe in such future. Thank you. Can I ask you the question? Yes, sure, please. All of the three issues you've listed, undoubtedly they exist, and we can go on with that, but all of that, if you have this conversation tomorrow with Miss Markarova, would you please explain to her? She knows a bit, I guess, that until the customs office is a fiscal authority, nothing can be done. Because the same Markarova will tell you, give me the plan, and until you deal with VAT, with customs, in the country which is at war, you will have not only Euro car plates and cell phones taken into the country, but weaponry, drugs, armament, whatever you want. And the customs does not deal with that, but it should deal with that. And the example of the United States about that is the brightest. The country at war cannot have the fiscal authority of the customs office. This is the most important thing. Then you will become what you used to be before. Who you used to be before. Okay. Thank you for the question. Just in short, when in 2014 I came to the customs component for the second time, not as a separate part but of the State Fiscal Service, the first document, after my assessment of the situation, what was going on with the institution and around it, the first document which I prepared for the country was in July 2014, in the burnout of the war, and the Vlovaisk was ahead of us, and so on. So my suggestion was to go along the way of the American model, to combine, because of the new challenges, because of the war, to combine the customs and the border service. Unfortunately, this idea was not considered. I consider that you're totally right with our geopolitical location. Well, unfortunately, the format of our roundtable has a different component, the business one, but still. You've asked the question, and I'm asking, because of our geopolitical location, because of our neighbor, and not only one neighbor, but lots of neighbors. You know what Romania, Hungary wants, the appetites of their certain circles for our country, for our territory. So that is why, if we have such an opportunity, I'd come back to this issue. I totally support your thesis. Thank you. Thank you so much. Can we have the questions in the end, because we've got more speakers now. The customs issues is a very important issue, especially according to the estimates of the international experts. I'll just say a statement about that. What needs to be seen, the Deutsche Zeitung said that in Ukraine we have the shadow and informal policy, and we lose more than 4 billion euro. It's just impossible. You need to pay attention to that. Because of the organization and the structure, which has to be more efficient, we do hope that it will be like that. Good day. I'm the representative of an SME. I'm dealing with the production, and we are more interested how to bring out the problems. You talked about how to bring in the products, but we want to take it out. I noted something down. You've said about the roadmap for us to export our products abroad. This is the most important for us because we need to achieve European markets, otherwise the SMEs won't survive. In a nutshell, I've been the head of the Kiev customs for lots of years. This is the biggest customs in the country with a powerful export component. My requirement was to the exporter not even to come closer to the exporter, to find out of the illegal VAT together with the law enforcement, but not even to come closer to all the rest. I will be sincere. The land traders came up to me, and I will speak about that with the Minister of Finance as well, because she's the head of the curator direction, and I think that she should fight them, right? You know what's going on now. And the functions of the security service of Ukraine is negative. It is violating all the norms. So I will make the Minister of Finance aware about the colossal problems of our exporters. That's all what I can answer. And again, I totally agree with you. In this situation, each one who is creating the product on the territory of Ukraine exports it. We should just really praise him or her. And the last thing about the load, the burden, this is the gradation. How many dollars were taken from the of taxation from one container during different periods of time. So the peak is $14,000. I'm taking the equivalent for you to understand, in spite of the currency rate, how much we took in 2014. And then everything went down, but the goods was the same. Why it happened? We spoke to the business and said, it is the war, let us pay fairly. And the business was ready for the fair play. The only requirement of all of the business, equal rules of the game. Give us an opportunity to work. Don't touch us. I know those theses as a former state official, and those theses will be given to the decision makers. Thank you. We'll come back to the competition policy now, so I'd like to give the floor to Alexander Melnichenko, who is the co-founder of our organization and also the head of the expert council of our organization, the former head of the anti-monopoly committee, the honorable lawyer of Ukraine, and who's been working as a judge for lots of years. This is the person who's done a lot for the development of the Ukrainian regulatory policy. So please, Alexander, please, let's have regulations 7 to 10 minutes, not more, because our event is also broadcast online at the page in Facebook. And our event can be seen all over in Ukraine and our partners from abroad. So please. Good day, esteemed colleagues. I'm really happy to greet you here at this event as one of its organizers and with other participants. So I'll try to be very short, because still in this or that way, we are the organizers of these events and we'd like to plan, as we always have done that, the recommendations for our high state officials, which would concern, as it was mentioned, in the competition policy, but also in the sphere of taxation and customs policy and other spheres we mentioned today. That's why the speech of Anatoly is incredibly relevant. He also managed the topic of equality and the creation of equal conditions for the business. This is what is directly on the shoulders of competition policy and the legislation and enforcement. Yesterday, maybe you haven't heard about that, yesterday it would be 106th anniversary from the birth of Herring, who, after he stopped being an MP of European Parliament, as a representative of Germany and TASIS program, he provided support for Ukraine in the development of the competition legislation, and we were working in that sphere. Why do I remember about that? Because he used to be one of the colleagues, and even the people of Erhard, who was the father of competitive law in Europe. He used to be a chancellor of the Federal Republic of Germany. And in fact, he insisted on that, having through the legislation authorities of Germany the first competitive legislation in Europe, and after that he insisted on the creation of the principles of common Europe, united Europe. I will not speak about the enforcement of the Anti-Monopoly Committee, how it was done by Anatoly Viktorovich, because I wouldn't speak from the behalf of the Cases International to create the analysis of enforcement, but I will speak about some of the principles of the competition policy and competition law. One of the problems during the last 20 years, in 1996, we've adopted the Constitution of Ukraine, where we have the Article 42, which foresees the announcement of the principles of the state protection of competition in the entrepreneurship, the banishment to create monopolies, but through the law, the banishment of unfair competition, the anti-competition actions from the cartels, what's named cartels in the West. Unfortunately, this principle today is not in the foundation of the activities of even our highest authorities. So even if we take the elementary cases and if we try, well, we are short of time, but let's try to have a quick analysis of the legislation which has been adopted during the last years. After we reported in the parliament about the protection of the economic competition in 2001, there have never been any substantial changes in the competition law. The Europe had this leap forward in the sphere of anti-monopoly competition policy. We had a very long stagnation. Unfortunately, we still have it. Some of the things which were introduced into the law about the protection of economic competition, about the economic concentration, does not regulate the whole bulk of the procedural problems. And this is where we have the lack of access or the closed character of the Anti-Monopoly Committee or SME. Secondly, the law on the public procurement. If we read it, we won't find anything about the process of the development or of the review by the Anti-Monopoly Committee of Ukraine of any decisions which happened in the public procurement and tender procedures. This is an incredible disadvantage which we could overcome, but we didn't. Whether the competition policy or competition anti-monopoly policy is in the basics of the activities of the central executive branch authorities, the Cabinet of Ministers of Ukraine. It may seem a paradox, but you wouldn't even find in the provisions about the ministry and the central executive branches any principles that they are obliged to deal with the development of competition. I would even say the following. In the beginning of the 2000s, those principles existed, but someone erased them. And they didn't like it, unfortunately, our ministries and central executive branch authorities, to use those principles, the equality of the rights which was mentioned above by Anatoly Viktorovich. We are not dealing about the enforcement of law because it is not about our SME topic today, but what I'd like to advise. We shouldn't not only review the legislation in the public procurement, review the legislation on the activities of the central executive branch authorities. I would again come back to the law on the national security and defense, where the principles of monopolization of trade markets should be more precise to the law on the Cabinet of Ministers. This is about the legislation base. As of the Anti-Monopoly Committee, we can only recommend it, and it's pleasant to hear from the head of the Anti-Monopoly Committee that they are emphasizing on the activities of the territorial units of the Anti-Monopoly Committee of Ukraine. I emphasize that's incredibly important, because 95% of the cases during the whole history of the Anti-Monopoly Committee annually are considered there by the regional territorial units of the Anti-Monopoly Committee. And we need to give them a very serious methodological help, serious support, informational support. So I think that we should, maybe it would be appropriate to recommend the head of the Anti-Monopoly Committee not only to deal with the problems which he mentioned above about the connection to the electrical networks, though it's incredibly important as well, but also to look at the practice of the some of the problems at the tenders. For instance, the conspiracies or collusive bidding. So, what we have developed during the last 25 years, or maybe at least during the recent 5 years, and we will see that there are lots of things we need to improve, and we should look that the partners of the Anti-Monopoly Committee is the Federal Trade Commission of the United States, the FTC, and we have the representative of FTC here. He is the bearer not only of the whole principle, but of the spirit of the USIT since 1990 when it was adopted, the Sherman Act, and 1909 when the FTC has been created. And our legislator will be recommended to pay more attention that the principles of competition policy were in the basics of the American policy as it is, when they restricted the power of monopolies, when, for those who create collusive bidding, they punished them not only by FTC, but they created the Department on Antitrust Investigations. Maybe it is time to renew, to restore the powerful cooperation of an Anti-Monopoly Committee of Ukraine with the Security Service of Ukraine, but not the one which was just described, but a bit of the reformed one, to review, renovate the cooperation with the State Bureau of Investigations and other authorities which deal with the investigations of the actions of private persons. We should think whether we should introduce the criminal responsibility for cartels, for instance. Maybe it should be very relevant during this period of time. And I'd like to wish all of you success in our complicated affair, because we have a very country in the basics. Uniting our efforts, we can overcome the problems we are having in the customs policy and in the law enforcement, in the tax policy and law enforcement, in the anti-competition policy, and all those which are the basics where we have our everyday economic life. Then undoubtedly we'll have the different Ukraine during a very short historical period of time. Thank you for your attention. Thank you so much. I also remember the example of Australia, where they conducted the analysis of competition policy and found out that there was certain legislation which broke the principles of neutrality. They changed the legislation and adopted the new one, and their GDP had the growth of 2.5%. They calculated that only thanks to the competition policy, which was incredibly important element to provide the efficient environment for the SMEs. Now we'd like to speak about our tax service. So using the opportunity, we'd like to greet Mr. Verlanov with an appointment. He wanted to visit our event, but we understand how much of work he has about the structural framework. So we're glad to greet Mr. Dmitro Oleksienko, who is an expert of the high level, who is the head of the Civil Council at the tax service. What are the first questions which will be solved soon? Do you have the strategy from the point of view of the support of the SMEs in the tax service? Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for the invitation and for the relevance of this event, and especially about the fiscal and taxation policy. You know, maybe lots of you have heard what the attack is going on the simplified system of taxation. Everybody says that we need to fight with the schemes, with the minimization of taxation. And the simplified system of taxation maybe is the first minimizer of this issue. Those challenges are heard on a permanent basis, but lately they are very active. And it did not even bring to surprise, but to aggression. Just let the simplified system of taxation be alone. The SMEs have to develop, not to be ruined. And we have those witnesses according to the dynamics of the unified taxation, plus 3 billion annually. So the input to the, because of the simplified system of taxation, were increased in 3 times. As this is the simplification of accounting and accountability, the economic efficiency, and the decrease of the interference of the state. And what's more, this is the status of the VAT payer, which is a very hard system and very hard to use. And it is impossible for the small enterprises. I'd like to drive your attention onto the 2 law drafts which we have in the session halls now. They are given by the MPs of Ukraine, not by the government. These are the law draft 9583 and the second one. So the first one increases the threshold volumes for the simplified system of taxation. The first group up to 1.5 million, the second group up to 10 million, the third group up to 40 million hryvnia. It simplifies the whole matter because the recent gradation is already obsolete. The currency rate is growing and so on, and the salaries are growing as well. So it would simplify the conduction of business by the entrepreneurs. And one more law draft is about the IT sphere. The taxation service is saying, we're coming to the big IT firm. There are 150 IT guys, and all of them are sole entrepreneurs. They all have lots of sums of money, and it's not competitive. Well, in fact, they are right, because they sometimes, the companies which pay pure salaries, and this is not competitive. So the profile, the line committee of the parliament which deals with the IT problems gave the law draft, and they would like to separate this group into the 5th separate group. They do have the suggestion to have the gradual increase up to 2025, to increase the rate up to 10%. They have the suggestion to increase the volume of profits up to 7.5 million for those professionals who are not used the hired employees, and they have some exclusive types of activities. They want this rate to be increased, not just to touch them at all. We are the normal system of taxation, they say. I would say that in the resolution we should include the support of those law drafts and the support of the simplified system of taxation. Thank you. Thank you so much. We'll do that for sure. And all of the participants of the events, we are saying to you, if you've got any ideas or any suggestions, please let us know about the issues of the agenda during the last 10 days. We'll look at them and include for the resolution after the event. And one more suggestion from me in a nutshell, to get away the limitation about the maximum volume of profit from the 3rd and the 5th above mentioned categories. Thank you. Thank you. The next speaker is the representative of the American Federal Trade Commission, Mr. Daniel Dicor. He is the permanent expert who's working with an anti-monopoly committee during several months, and he will tell us about the experience of the United States, about the support of SMEs and the creation of the regulatory policy, which experience maybe we can have or copy down in our system. So please, Mr. Daniel, the floor is yours.
Thank you.
Дякую.
And thank you for the invitation to speak today. I should also thank USAID for funding the ability of Federal Trade Commission experts to be here, as well as in other countries, providing our help to various antitrust and competition law enforcement agencies. I know we're running short of time, and which always happens by the time they get to me, but I will just talk about some key points that I think you all should bear in mind, because I think it will help move things forward here. And before I continue, I have to make the remark that these are my views. I'm not speaking officially for the Federal Trade Commission or for any of its commissioners, although hopefully I'm not at great odds with the views of the agency. We all know that my agency, the FTC, as well as the AMCU, have an enforcement role to bring cases when they find violations and to issue fines in the case of the AMCU, or to issue demands that conduct cease, to block mergers that would be anti-competitive and all that. And that's certainly an important role, and it takes up more of the budget than anything else that the agencies do. But I think an equally important role, especially in Ukraine, is to be the lookout, be the watchman for regulations and other government-imposed rules that restrict competition and limit entry, and in various ways, although they may be well-meaning, limit the ability of small and medium enterprises either to get into business or to expand their businesses and to compete equally with what we would call the big guys. And there's two reasons for that. I think regulations, for the most part, are originally well-meaning, but if you look at the studies, it will become clear that over time, industries that are under regulation become entrenched in the sense that the members of the industry view the regulation as a way to protect themselves against competition, either competition from smaller firms who have a better idea of how to do business, or competition from firms that want to enter that market and compete. I think we lose sight of that because obviously when you think about health and safety and consumer and financial protection, you can make good arguments for regulations in all sectors. But I think an important role for the agency and an important role for you representing small and medium enterprises is to be on the lookout for places where either a regulation on its face does more harm than good, or where a regulation, when you look at it more closely, becomes clear that it's trying to do the right thing, but doing it in a way that is stifling competition. And again, I want to be brief. The US FTC has a regular program of submitting its views formally in the form of letters, sometimes signed by staff, sometimes signed by the commissioners themselves, that are submitted to US national government regulators, such as the agency that regulates the oil and gas industry or telecommunications. They send these views to the state governments when they're thinking about imposing laws or regulations on various industries that run the gamut from the hospital and healthcare industries all the way to things like barbershops and beauticians and lawn care services. All kinds of businesses find themselves subject to regulation. And one of the important roles of the FTC, and I think an important role here, is to call out those regulators and say, wait a minute, if you think this is a well-meaning regulation, let's think about a better way to do what we're doing so that we're not unnecessarily restricting competition. Because competition is good for consumers, obviously, and competition is good for the members of the industry, so long as the industry is not being dominated by a few large firms. Those are the firms that tend to look at regulation as a way to protect them from competition. Let me propose a test that I think it's a general test, and I think if you apply this to every situation, it will both give you a way to identify problems and a way to formulate your objection when you bring it to the attention of the government. And the test should start with, what is this regulation intending to protect? Is it intending to protect the consumers, either in terms of their health and safety? For example, It's not unusual to require medical doctors to pass a test and be licensed by the government. And we can all understand that that is a useful and necessary regulation because we want to protect people against the practices of unskilled people who pretend to be medical experts. That's almost unassailable. But when they then continue to go to the category of we have expert nurses who are working under the close supervision of doctors, but we're going to limit their ability to write certain kinds of prescriptions, and the argument may sound like it's to protect consumers from unskilled nurses, but in fact what it is to protect other doctors from increasing competition from nurses who know as much about that particular disease and are working closely with other doctors, and if they could write prescriptions, the cost of medical services to consumers would go down. So sometimes you have to look closely at what looks to be a well-meaning regulation and look at what its real effect is. That's the second part of the test. Does it make entry into the market or expansion by people who are in the market difficult or impossible? Does it protect the existing competitors from new competitors? That's a critical test. Because if it does, and my profession is as liable as any, before I could practice law, I had to take the bar exam, and having taken it, you wonder why you take it once, and for the next 40 years, nobody ever asks to see if your expertise is continued. So why take the exam? Why require me to take the bar exam before I can become a licensed lawyer? One argument is the law profession doesn't want everybody coming in practicing law. They want to protect themselves against competition. It may be a well-meaning concept. We don't want people pretending to know about the law and giving legal advice who are totally untrained. But if it's only applied once in a person's career, and it's applied with a test that's given over 2 days in the hot summer after graduation from the law university, and after that you're clear sailing for the rest of your career like I am, how much protection does it really offer? There's a good question to be raised there. And the last part is, can you think of a better way to serve the legitimate goals of that regulation, but in a way that might allow more competition? So that's your challenge as representatives of SMEs. It's also the challenge for the agency. And I would say, and I'll wrap this up, I think that if you do only one thing, it should be to look for all those instances where you can see rules from local government or national government or sometimes from trade associations who impose rules on themselves and get the blessing of the government. If you can identify instances where those are causing competitive harm and don't seem to be doing the job of really protecting consumers, and you can think of a better way to protect consumers and open up the market to competition from your members and others, bring that to the attention of the agency. Bring it to the attention of the regional offices. Don't be quiet about it. Write a letter to the local newspaper and make your case. Be loud. And make the point that the only way the economy is going to be able to expand for the benefit of smaller firms and for the benefit of consumers is if the unnecessary regulatory burden gets addressed. And it can only be addressed rule by rule, regulation by regulation, one at a time. And I think if that's what you set to be your goal, whether it's a small regulation that you spend months and months advocating about, or you take on an entire industry, if you take that battle on and you push hard, you can have an effective result.
Thank you very much, Dan. Very comprehensive insight. We'll have some questions too later. А зараз я хочу надати слово.
I'd like to give the floor to Mr. Andriy Slabinsky, who is the head of the Office of Development of SMEs at the Ministry of Economic Development and Trade. We know that in 2016 we have developed the strategy of the support and development of SMEs. It has become acting up to 2020. Soon we'll see 2020. So would you tell us? We are really interested. What about the strategy of the development of SMEs? Whether it used to be efficient during the last 3 years, 2.5 years? What are the perspectives of the improvement of this strategy? And which work is done now? Because we are ready with our expert community to provide support to you, your additional ideas, for it to be a comprehensive strategy which would help you to develop this sector of our economy. Please, the floor is yours. Thank you for the invitation, first of all. I'm glad to have another opportunity to share the work of the Ministry and the Office in the sphere of the development of SMEs. So, answering your question about the assessment of the efficiency of the strategy, it's not that enough. We need to work for 2 years more. And unfortunately, because of lots of reasons, the implementation of the strategy will take more time than we planned before. This is the gap between the taking of the strategy in 2017 and the plan of implementation in 2018. Still, we can see that we can be in time to do something useful for the entrepreneurs. So the creation of the Office of the Development of SMEs, which has to become a consultative authority today at the Ministry of Economical Development, is the project which is supported by the European Union within the platform Europe for Business, and that is one of the tasks of the implementation of the strategy as the transition period before we create the permanently functioning institution which would deal with the implementation of this strategy. Because at the moment of the development of the strategy, it was obvious that the existing resource within the ministry, within the department, within one department, is not enough for the implementation of the above-mentioned strategies to solve some of the problems, especially taking into consideration that the ratio of the tasks in the document is more non-regulatory decisions, which are not limited by the regulation or law, which is a more typical way to solve certain problems which can be found in the functions and responsibility of the ministries and institutions. That is why, without the people who need to work on that which state measures of support have to be done, we have the following aim. We've got 10 people, what then? What should be done? Within the development of the strategy, we've analyzed a substantial number of research, surveys, and problems. Just take and do. And there's lots of that. But it's impossible to solve all of that, and very often it's beyond the opportunities of the office, of the ministry, or the government even. So the approach we've chosen is the following: to create the system, the base, the foundation which would allow to have the more efficient use of the existing opportunities for the business. I'm speaking about the different types of programs, regional ones and international ones, and donors ones, which exist in Ukraine, and very often attending different events where we present the different programs. When I asked the entrepreneurs that this program is working for lots of years in Ukraine, they said, no, we don't know anything about that. Where can we get to know about that? Because in the internet we can find lots of sources, and the truthfulness of the information is not that easy to find out, and we don't know what to search for. And secondly, to help the creation of the institutional base, because in the centralized way, we cannot solve the problems of the SMEs. It's just impossible. We can change the tax rate, and everybody will feel it. But if we speak about the program of the support, which has to help the access to the financial resources, the knowledge base, the central decision will not be helping there. That's why we are saying we should speak about the development of this infrastructure at the places, at the level of the cities, regions, communities which are being created more and more. And a different direction which should help this is the development of the program products which can be implemented within the program documents which are adopted at the certain levels. What's uniting those directions? I mean, the development of the infrastructure, the development of the program products, and the development of capabilities. The 2 points I'd like to emphasize. This is the implementation of the system of their monitoring, because there are lots of programs, both international and at the places they've been implemented, but very often it's not that easy to get the simple question what this program led to. Which sums of money were saved if we speak about the financial programs? Which of them were activated with the help of it? And how many entrepreneurs have changed their internal production processes? They have become more efficient and effective. And to solve this problem, we aim just exactly that. I haven't planned to have a very long presentation. I've just chosen a separate part of it, which is dedicated to the idea of the centers of support of entrepreneurship at the places, where the ground which allows to scale this model, which is the centers of administrative services provisions. This choice is substantiated because of several reasons. Having started the previous experience, we had the position that we don't want to create any new institutions. Moreover, at the places, Ukraine had such experience of the creation of the certain policy of these institutions, and it had the different results. It was not always the best one. So the basic approach is to use the existing infrastructure. And the choice of TSNAP or CASP in this case is substantiated because if we look at the history of their development, they began as the centers which were focused for business. Just later on, we gave them the social component, which is also beginning and going on to develop. The second story is maybe one of the very successful reforms of the government. I mean the reform of the administrative services, where in the list of the services is improved every day, where it's pleasant to get to those centers and it's pleasant to be in their premises. It's convenient to be there, and this is also supported by the international partners of Ukraine, so to get any specific component there is rather logical. Secondly, it allows us to use the resource which is at the places, the resource of the municipalities, where too you're planning to open such centers, beginning with the pilot regions, which cannot be interested in the development of entrepreneurship at the territories of the communities and which have the financial capacities and resources not only to create those centers but to implement other mechanisms of support, and we are planning to help them in that. What else is important as an example of this initiative, what we should pay attention to? We are not aiming to create the system which would have an ambition to compete with the private sector of business consulting. That's also the market, that's also an SME which has to be developed, and we need to develop the stimulus for that. Still, we have the issues where the representatives of the state, in spite of administrative level we are mentioning, they have to have an opportunity to have a professional support about the regulatory environment and about the state and regional local programs of support. This is their direct obligation in those issues to give and to provide support to the entrepreneurs. Still, when we say about other topics which were also interesting for the entrepreneurships, this is the taxation policy issues, intellectual property or labor law code. We have the specialized state institutions about that and non-state institutions which can provide information for its further posting within the informational package of the center which they can use. But if we speak about the international support programs, during each of the project there are always the group of consultants which are created to do everything possible to improve the access of the entrepreneurs to their products. And the exit to this broader circle has to be done by the centers. The same concerns the objects of the infrastructure, the private ones, which are not that easy to implement within the state intervention. I mean the acceleration and incubation projects, where we can see more support in their awareness about their opportunities, about their existence, and how you can find them if, for instance, the entrepreneur is the potential startupper who has a cool idea, is searching for an opportunity where he can bring it to the level of the prototype or the product. So, in the end of the day, we're speaking about the creation of the multi-level web, the community, which would help us, on the one hand, to create the distribution and dissemination of information from the central level at the places, and on the other hand, this should be the movement for the both sides to help the ministry and the regional and the local authorities to understand which are the problems from the same micro business, which would hardly afford itself to come to different conferences which are conducted in Kiev or even in the million population cities. With the base of public applications, we'd like to get a very demonstrative big data out of which we can create the customized and addressed support programs. This project is directly connected with a different one, the creation of the portal, which has been maintaining and leading the entrepreneurs to the available opportunities and the objects of infrastructure, and to give an opportunity to give feedback what he or she thinks about that. If we speak about the portal itself, we can see it not only as an informational resource which provides everything what we have, please look at that. We are trying to create about each of the block of the support programs the automatized process of its collection for the entrepreneur coming to these projects and giving the basic information who he is, what he's dealing with, and what's his need, to get the list not out of 100 of programs, some of which cannot be used because they are in English only, but just to get the filtered list of the opportunities which would be totally correspondent to his needs. If we speak about the programs of support which have been mentioned above, we have chosen three directions of that which we think can be scaled in the perspective. First of all, this is for the existing entrepreneurs to improve their efficiency through the implementation of their business processes and of the innovation of technical and non-technical solutions, and also the founding of your own business. And if we speak about the financial support, this is the question of the access towards the banking funding through the system of credit guarantees. We can see that the loaning market of SMEs is increasing annually, and on the other hand, we understand that the main client, well, SME is too broad. I would say it's more of the medium enterprises, and small and micro business don't always use the opportunity of bank loans, not only because of its prices, but because of the requirements for the property. So the mechanism of the partial guarantee should create this multiplier which should increase the number of entrepreneurs who would be able to use the banking funding. All of that is what I wanted to mention. If there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer. Thank you. Thank you. And now Oleg Platonov, please, with your comments about the same speech. Good day, ladies and gentlemen. I thank the organizers for an opportunity to take part in this meeting. The questions are not only relevant but very important because the competition today is one of the elements of the protection. Protection of the competition is the element how to ruin SMEs, because SMEs cannot provide the protection on its own. And in Ukraine, They've implemented the tools of consolidation through the associations. This is how the entrepreneurs can make the central executive branches authorities aware about their problems. I am the member of the Collegium of the Ministry of Economic Development and Trade, the head of the delegation in Ukraine. CFACT UN. This is the process of the Center of Simplifying of Procedures of Trade. The Center of Simplifying is developing recommendations for the governments, and it was not that pleasant for me to hear Mr. Terentiev that the project of the information systems of the port organization, which is acknowledged by the UN in the Agenda 2020 as the best projects of the technical cooperation of the private and state and public business, and last week it won in the International Chamber of Commerce in the competition with the topic counteraction towards corruption and the peace building, so it won the third place in the European region. And in practice the problem is the only one, what was mentioned by Mr. Ducor, that sometimes the Ukrainian laws are not that compulsory to be implemented, and the state officials just violate them and avoid responsibility. If we take the tasks which we face, I'm grateful to Andriy, who showed the presentations what the office is striving for. This is really to give an opportunity to all of the subjects of the state sector and the commercial one through the unified informational resource to get the quick access to information. And this is exactly the first provision of the requirements and the agreements in the simplifying of the procedures of trade. And in our state we have created, according to these agreements, the Council, the National Committee on the Simplifying of Trade Procedures, as a working group, which is included into the Council on the Cooperation of the International Trade. The questions which were mentioned above about the expert are rather interesting, because this working group is permanently acting authority, which gathers the information from the business and brings it to the government. And this week we should adopt the program, the plan of actions on the implementation of the full agreement. So the root issues of this agreement are, which impact the export and import, is the preliminary decision, which gives an opportunity for the exporter and importer to assume how the controlling authority at the border would act. Secondly, the economic operators, which unfortunately are so exhausted that it's already shameful. The economic operator is the main partner of the state, and there was the question from Alexander about the indicators of profitability. It's impossible to plan the budget in your life without the understanding of the principles of trade operations, because more than 50% of the budget is existing thanks to the border fees, a very low level of cooperation at the borders of the controlling authorities, because the Ministry of, as it was written in the decree of the Parliament, is still not working. The Ministry is not reorganized, it's not liquidated still. We have the confusion in the terms. So the authorities, if they don't have any ministries, but they still have the authorities. And because of the terminology, we have serious conflicts emerging. It's very important, being at this round table, to create this work at the consulting according to the global contract of the UN and 17 Sustainable Development Goals. The strategy of the support of SMEs is constructed according to the 17 principles of sustainable development, and the advanced entrepreneurs who want to protect themselves need to get to know everything about that. Lots of organizations help us in that. The last work was with CLDP. We had the seminar in the cooperation with CLDP of the Anti-Monopoly Committee. with the Ministry of Economic Development and other state institutions. According to the initiative of the business, we've planned the seminar for July, which would open the problematics and issues of the real protection of competition and interaction with the authorities which need to protect competition environment with the courts. Because unfortunately in our country everybody considers that this is just an economic discrepancy between the committee and the entrepreneur, not between the different entrepreneurs. And the second issue is the one which tells us about the administrative, unfortunately unlimited term of all of the administrative violations and abuses. I will tell you the example of the administrative system of the port community and how it has been implemented. When in the ports of Ukraine, from each of the container, they took $20, the non-standard tax, and they didn't even look at the papers. According to the application of Odessa port, we took the structure which agreed to invest into this project, and when they spoke about the distribution of risks and responsibilities, the state said the one thing: those are your risks, and the ownership is also your risk. And now we have the moment when the system began to work. The system is dealing with more than 1,100 commercial partners and 30 executive branch authorities. The whole e-communication without any papers. Still, they have the traditional system preserved, that is, the application of the paper through the officer of the port for the subjects, 2% of the subjects who still use it. This is not for free. This service costs $2 a container, per container, but the advantage is the following. You get a very quick response, and if you haven't got it during the predetermined term and the decision, you can file a complaint in the same e-document. What did we decrease? We decreased the expense onto the staff. Nobody is standing in the queues. There is no fee of $20 anymore. But as the Ministry of Inland Revenue is still existing, we are having discussions. The Ministry of Infrastructure says, you know, this is the project of the state. They have some data preserved which can be stolen, so let us take it and create our own. So today this is one of the serious threats when the serious central executive branch authorities in cooperation with the Anti-Monopoly Committee, if Mr. Ducor gets to know about that, he will see the reverse experience, the negative experience, as it was mentioned by Mr. Yuri Terentiev. They've got lots of documents, but still they contradict to each other, and there are the letters from the committee which have been published for the authorized not to abuse their position, and they claimed the documents only which concerned the case. So how did the Anti-Monopoly Committee earn? Because the data was not that precise and truthful, not the essence of the circumstances of the monopoly right and the unfair competition, but just on the right that this is the final authority, so it requests whatever it wants and how much it wants. So the Ministry of Economic Development and Trade is interested today in the transparency of the tools, and when we try to fight someone, for it to be a real fight, not just manipulation of the notions in the totally different aims. I'm coming to the conclusion. So about that, I'd like to say the following. We need to be very careful with an innovational projects. Using this opportunity, as you are the consultants, I would like to find one more important conclusion. The legislator too adopted the law that the innovative processes and all about the price is the competency of the taxation authority. And the Anti-Monopoly Committee said, we will not perform. This is our private opinion. So all of those discrepancies exist. I'm really grateful to the organizers of the round table. It was systematically created for the seminar in July, where we have all the representatives about the public procurement and about the role of anti-monopoly committee and the judges and the central legislator. But we will need more time, and we need to be very precise about that, because Anatoly showed us the right thing. If we today are in the power without having 3 points: what's done at the expense of the budget, what's done at the expense of the administrative service, and what the commercial service is. If we look when the anti-monopoly committee is trying to protect the business, and we see it in the competitive environment and saying that the state has the priority, this is the totally thing. So the society needs to take under control those legislative regulations and the taxation code. Anatoly Viktorovich paid attention to this fact. When the last code was taken, the concept was face to the people. But now we don't have this face to the people, because 2000 estimation norms defined by the code are not adopted by the state, and they are all today the subject of the compromise, because we don't have responsibility for that 200 of norms in the today's code which were never existing for that. Thank you. Thank you. As far as I understand, this is an invitation to cooperate on those things. We will even finally, you will be finally get exhausted because of us, but we are not consultants. We are a non-commercial, non-profit organizations. We are dealing with a collection of the experts to develop our country, and 90% of our time is a non-commercial activity. And now I'd like to speak about the positive experience of some of the even imperfect regulatory conditions in our country. I was really surprised when my friends, because I'm from Ivano-Frankivsk, and I was told about the initiative which we had in our city. This is Urban Space 100. Mr. Yuri will tell us about that. And the innovative project of Profitability. This is the social project with an economic sphere involved, but how Yuri and his team were able to increase this project, I couldn't believe my own ears. I will be totally sincere with you, and I won't comment anymore on the project of the Mr. Yuri. I'll tell you how we can help to do that in Ukraine and in other regions of Ukraine. Thank you. Thank you. I'll mention instantly the time the representative of the two sectors, business and the civil society. And this is how we are working. So if I may, I need the clicker to come through the presentation. But we understand the importance of the work of the triangle: the business, the power, and the civil society. So we believe that the whole dynamics of the city, of the country, is achieved when we have the balance. So the Prompt Renovation Project is an attempt to create this dialogue. In particular, we are creating the ecosystem on base of the abandoned factory, a post-Soviet one, at the intersection of the four main directions: the activization of the modern economy with the development of education, modern art, and urbanism. Our object is 2 hectares of land, 28,000 of square meters in the center of Ivano-Frankivsk, and 10,000 of square meters are being constructed. So as for Ivano-Frankivsk, this is the typical region center, the western Ukraine. And we have some of the positive trends and certain problematics which can be found in any medium or small city. Still, we have an international airport. It's important. We look at ourselves as the part of a broader ecosystem with which cities we can cooperate in 500 or 1,000 kilometers. And this is the map in our comparison with other centers, so we understand that we can be at the world map. This is what our regions lack: the healthy ambitions. And this is the picture of brown fields. The gray zones are the abandoned factories of the factories. This is a very typical picture for any post-Soviet city. There are lots of such factories, and very often this is the problem for the cities. So we try to develop the model when this project can be transformed into the point of activation for the whole societal organism. The factory has the history of more than 100 years. We are in the center, 5 to 7 minutes on foot from the main pedestrian street. So we create the business center of 40,000 square meters. The city still doesn't have anything like that. We don't have commercial square meters, and we have the lack of trade square meters here. So, in fact, this is the architectural concept, this is the stages of implementation, and I need to say that we have 7 economic clusters of the new economy, of regional ones. We've analyzed those trends together with SRR International. This is the research institute which specializes on the activation of the new sectors of economy, and we researched the region in 500 kilometers. We have the potential, which potential we can include thanks to this project. In each of those trends, that is education, art, economy, and urbanism, we have different functions: IT school, some technological labs, art elements, offices of the innovation companies, and so on. So here you can see the cart. Well, you cannot because it's a bit too far, but we created all of those functions according to different floors. The ecosystem character is achieved through the intersectoral character. Different players on the territory are the civil organizations, businesses, and the local self-governance as well. And as a result, it is transformed into this picture. This is the modern city infrastructure, which has lots of various elements which sum up to the innovative environment where they're given birth to the new businesses, new projects, both business and non-business in particular. What has already been done? For about a year, we've reconstructed one floor that is 2,000 square meters, and we filled it with 16 different operators. There are business there, civil organizations, and the Office of Investment Policy of the City Executive Committee. So this is the first president of Ukraine of the physical interaction in the triangle I'm emphasizing upon. In our opinion, it's very important. We've got common programs, and all of that is done in the modern infrastructure, transparent offices, everything is intersected, and lots of intersectoral cooperation between those different elements. In particular, we've got conferences conducted here and events and different elements which you can see here. This is the acting and the functioning infrastructure. As a business, it generates the revenue on several levels. This is renting of the premises, the reconstruction and further renting, the event management, and some of the digital tools which are also capitalizing the project. In the project, we are already on the 3.5 years, and we've collected $2.5 million. It was privatized factory, but now we are acquiring it into the project, and during the next 4 years we are planning to implement this project to the full extent. The business model is the following. This is the impact investment market project, the creation of business which in its base solves certain important societal or environmental tasks. We have the holding company which owns the assets, and 70% of which belongs to the non-commercial fund, which includes commercial investments, and 30% the charity fund, which is maintained by the consortium of the partnership and civil organizations and provides the important social component of the project. $25 million are gradually involved into the commercial component, and $5 million in the plans, because we need to involve them through the different international and Ukrainian institutions as grants to implement direct social functions like the art center, the scientific research center, the incubators and accelerators for the development of SMEs, and so on and so on. And when everything is constructed already, it will generate revenue. 70% is coming to the investors, 30% are reinvested as the grant support for the social programs, the education, art, science, the development of SMEs. There are certain business calculations. The project is pre-calculated in all of the details, and the legal model and the business model. Ernst and Young were shaping our final business plan, and also we involved lots of international schools like Stanford and London School and other. The project has the potential of capitalization from the point of view of the economy, so after we create all of that, the cost of the object is increasing, so the part of each investor, the share of each investor is increasing as well, and the profitability is 8 to 12%. Well, the return on investment is 8 to 12%. Those are the logos of our partners which we managed to consolidate. There are lots of them. Those are governments of Sweden, Canada, the United States, Germany, Switzerland, UK, and also the project is officially in the strategy of development of Ivano-Frankivsk city, so it's approved at all of the levels. And of course we've got lots of commercial partners which in fact are added every day. This Monday we had the fundraising closed event in Kiev, and we collected more than $860,000 again, so the project is gaining speed. So in fact that's it from me. This is the facade in the entrance. This is the Canadian one which was given by the ambassador of Canada. This is again a very substantial thing for us. And those signs of a bigger investors who are included into the projects and supporting it, and also they create the additional economic attractiveness. About our today's event, I'd like to say which issues we can speak about. Well, first of all, it seems to me that the role of the state, there are two positive roles of the state in the interaction with similar projects. First of all is the minimum product, do not interfere, and it's already a lot for Ukraine. But if we speak about the support, I can see it in the following way. In our project there can be two spheres. First of all, we really have the lack of the tools for the involvement of smaller investments. For the preferable investments, for the corporate investments, we've got some of that. We're using that, but they have the minimal threshold for the private person, at least 1,820,000 hryvnia. We'd like to involve the investments from 1,000 and more, of course. We lack the normal toolkit, and it gives the road for the middle class in this country to be expressing itself, and there is certain interest in such projects. We need just the tools. And secondly, in these projects in the well-developed world are mostly invested by the state, because this is the win for the whole society, and very often the state is an acquirer of such projects. We are doing that without any support from the state. It would be really nice if the state would always also be included in such projects, not for the whole investment package, but 30% at least. It's if the state would be there, and at the level of the supervisory boards to form the common agenda, because it also influences the agenda of the city and of the region, and this is the replicable model. We created it to give it to other cities, because the interest is rather high, both in Ukraine and beyond it. We are totally invited by Stanford, Oxford, Davos. We are coming with this project to Canada, to the International Economic Forum, to Toronto. So this is the part of Ukrainian development of intellectual property which can be intellectual in the developed world. So I think that there is something to study there, but it's interesting for us to create dialogue with the power and with the state. Thank you. Thank you so much, Yuri. After your speech, I may say we are inspired, because this is the initiative which, first of all, is not only creating job places, because as far as I know, there are workers from Kiev coming to you. They are moving from Kiev to work to Ivano-Frankivsk, not to Poland. Yes, from Kiev and from Vienna, from Berlin, from Indianapolis, from other countries. So when more than 1 million of Ukrainian workers are leaving Ukraine, there are certain centers which attract people, vice versa. So we will support your initiative for 100%. I do hope that Mr. Slabinsky, Mr. Platonov and other colleagues of ours can work on that and develop this strategy of SME including such projects and to work with the Parliament for the legislative changes introduced. Okay, then, the last presentation for today and the short discussion. I'd like to present Ms. Anastasia Baklan, who will be the presenter of the SIPE, Center for International Private Enterprise. This is their organization, which is one of the four key foundations for the National Endowment for Democracy. This is the huge American center, which are working since 1983. If I'm not mistaken, they've got the projects in 130 countries, more than 130 projects in 50 countries of the world. This is the huge organization which deals with the development of the small and medium enterprises. Could you tell us what's going on in Ukraine now from your perspective? Which mechanisms do you have developed, and about your experience a bit? Thank you. Thank you, Sergei. I greet you, dear participants. I'm the representative of the Center of International Private Entrepreneurship, SIPE, and I would like to begin with the mission, why we have been created. This is the strengthening of democracy through the development of private entrepreneurship and the market reforms. SIPE is, as it was already mentioned by Sergei, one of the four institutions of the National Endowment of Democracy and one of the non-commercial affiliates of the American Chamber of Commerce. It's working all over the world to this or that extent through different programs, and in Ukraine our office has been created more than 20 years ago. So the representation was founded in 2010. The main events we are organizing different conferences, trainings, programs, the development of documents and the research in the SMEs segment, the development of law drafts in the cooperation with the business community and so on. The target audience of the majority of the programs are the business associations, but we do not exclude and working actively with the state authorities, with the legislative and executive branches, with different civil organizations and media, and also the chambers of commerce and industry which are in Ukraine and other countries and so on. The project phases are beginning annually in July and are finalized in June. So we are now summarizing the work of our year, and I'd like to tell you about 5 key program trends which have been implemented, and I hope they will go on next year. The first one, and we are most of all we're proud of that, this is the beginning of the National Advocacy Campaign of Business. The segment of the small and medium entrepreneurship was united before the elections, which were planned and are already taking place in 2019. We've united more than 76 business associations which represent more than 35,000 of enterprises all over the country. The initiators were the Union of Ukrainian Entrepreneurs and the Ukrainian Council of Business, and our center, SIPE, supported this initiative and became the facilitator, independent facilitator of this process and so-called secretariat, which helps to develop certain documents and to follow to maintain everything on the following level. We've developed top priorities of the business through the open procedure. We had a certain voting and several meetings where we invited business associations of our country, and they were given to the candidates to the presidents of Ukraine in March this year. Now, we did not guess who the candidates, who became the president. We invited everyone. We didn't have the difference who is at power. We wanted to promote the ideas which would help the development of SMEs. So in fact, the work is not over after the presidential elections. We are going on with the development of the certain initiatives, concepts and law drafts which will be given to the political parties. This work is totally open. I do invite all of the stakeholders today to come to the website which is called Business Voice in UA, or just you can Google the National Advocacy Campaign of Business. There's the information at the website and in the social networks of Facebook. It's open to join, so if you are the representative of the membership business association which is working in Ukraine, you can join this initiative and to take part in the events, the voting process, and in the promotion of the events of SMEs. The second direction, which is also rather ambitious, and it started several years ago, is the Academy of Leadership for the Development, the program of the preparation of efficient managers, both in the public and private sectors. It is being implemented together with the Stanford University and the School of Management of the Ukrainian Catholic University. One of the inspirers and coaches who come to us, and we're really happy about that, is Professor Francis Fukuyama, who is teaching directly, and he's our participant, and he's sharing the experience with students and working on certain cases which are conducted in the Stanford University, and all the information can be found online. Mostly it's posted at the page of Facebook of School of Management of the Ukrainian Catholic University. So we do hope that this program will go on. It went on during 2.5 years. So if you've got an opportunity or the wish to take part in this week of an efficient learning with the participants of Stanford professors, it's possible. So we select according to the competition. The third trend is the training program for the top management of the business associations. This is one of the trends the site began with in our country, and we've prepared more than 130 business associations, both national ones and branch ones, the regional associations, and during the last 2 years it's going on not only with the participants of our highly qualified experts, but also with the participants of the American Center of the Nonprofit USA, which is teaching in the Ukrainian Chamber of Commerce, Robert Harris. If you know him personally, Mr. Bukovets knows him and he's here. It's really an outstanding expert who helps to provide the system with the budget activity, with the involvement of the new members, and which services, new services have to be implemented, and so on. Which associations went through this program? The Agrarian Confederation, the Union of Entrepreneurs of the Small and Medium Enterprises, the Club of Young Entrepreneurs, the League of Professional Businesswomen, the Club of Businessmen, and the Grain Association, and so on. The fourth direction of the development, the trainings for the business associations, and since this year of amalgamated territorial gromadas, communities, for the analysis of the impact onto the segment of micro-entrepreneurship. Moreover, we've developed the online resource with the support of the site, which allows to conduct all of those calculations online in a simple and much more convenient form than it is usually calculated in the Excel file. This online resource was given and now under the maintenance of the State Regulatory Service of Ukraine, and the certain link can be found at the website of ours. The fifth direction, which I'd like to mention about, and which we have implemented 2 to 3 years ago, but we have still the results even today. This is the project, the Confident Business and Reach Community. It's being implemented with the help of the US aid in Ukraine, and what we've done here, we've developed the web portal. Maybe the target audience of this event know about such resource as a national platform of small and medium enterprises, the platform of sme.org.ua. This is the website where we have the relevant news, the information about grant programs which are accessible for the SMEs, certain analytics of the law drafts, recommendations, practical ones about the guidelines, and so on. So we organized the tender committee when this project was over. It was 2 years ago, and we gave it to the maintenance of the National Organization of Retailers of Ukraine. It was pleasant when the project which you've implemented is not over when you don't do there, when the grant resources are over, but they go on living without our support. As of the plans for the following years, first of all, to go on and to strengthen our current activity, which was told above, and also there is an idea, and I hope it will be implemented, to implement the video program about the development of democratic processes in Ukraine and the Eastern Partnership countries. We'll begin with Kiev. And if you've got any ideas, I thank Sergei for the invitation to this event, which is really an example of the public-private dialogue which is taking place with an expert community and the experts of the public and private sector. These events and the outcomes of these events are really nice. We'd like to highlight them in our video program. And of course, we'll be glad to hear your offers of cooperation. These ideas will be collected till February 2020, and since the next year, we can be speaking about their implementation. Our contacts. Well, I do apologize, I don't have the presentation today, but I will say that our information about our activity can be found in the social network of Facebook, SIPE Ukraine, SIPE. This is the acronym. And also you can add me in your friends if you have any questions about the cooperation with our organization. And also I don't have the business cards, but I have these brochures. So if you're interested, we have the description of our program activities and we can communicate when the event is over. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you so much for the speech and your support during the organization of this event. And now we've got 5 to 7 minutes only because we are already out of time. What are the questions of the participants? If not, I will ask some questions. I've got several. So please introduce yourself and who you're addressing your question to. Well, maybe to Alexander Melnichenko from the Ukrainian Association of Bakers. We're speaking about the competitiveness in our society. So for today, we've got lots of shadow business in our branch and in milk industry, dairy industry, and some other ones. Which ways do you see to solve this issue in Ukraine? Thank you. Well, maybe I will speak not only about your market, but I will speak about all of the problems. That's why I began that in my speech. If we don't create this system, and this is the timely manner to do that, because there is the change of power, the redistribution of power. If we create the system where we'll have the world principles of anti-monopoly policy, which foresee the equality of rights, the equality of obligations, including of the state, which foresee the demonopolization of the economy, which is not mentioned that much, but this topic is mature enough, it's ripened enough, it is in the interests of the whole Ukrainian society. This topic has to be at the highest level, and we need to develop certain tools, changes and amendments to the legislation which concern the sphere of the business in particular, and the obligations of the state authorities, and down there till the rural areas. If we don't create with a red line the legislative and law enforcement system which foresees the work of the correspondent local self-governance authorities and others, then we will see totally different Ukraine, which will be in favor of SMEs, where the principles of competitiveness will be working. That's why we gathered here today. It's relevant. And we are willing to do everything to do that, to create a different Ukraine, because we know and understand Anatoly. He is already, for instance, a very important person in the customs and other ones in the taxation sphere. And as Mr. Yuri showed us an example how we should construct it from bottom to top, you have a colossal experience. That's combine our efforts and develop the first resolution of our cases international, because we've conducted lots of events before, but the authorities were not listening to that. Let's be frank. The voice was heard only by those who are at power. If you're not at power, nobody listens to you. It's not that nice. This is not why the state exists. It does not exist for the space. It exists for the people. And their institutions are created for the children. For the people. They have to be created for the people. I do apologize that my question is not precise enough, but I can create the total instruction about the law enforcement, about the branches of the economy, of the bakery in particular. The gray, the black, or any other negative business has to be ruined. It should be taken out of the shadow. The world has already overcome this history, and we need just to take some lessons and to implement them. Thank you, and I do apologize. Thank you. You've got the question right. I'm Irina Mazur, the head of the entrepreneurship of Kiev National University of named after Shevchenko. We have the whole group, so we thank you. So first of all, the question whether you plan to develop these meetings, and just in practical terms, we heard some of the propositions. But are you planning to cooperate? Because we are preparing the third year students for the specialization of entrepreneurship, and our school does not get any information about the entrepreneurship. So we're doing all of that with our own efforts because we are taking our graduates and they need to get the basics of these. This is the first question. The second question is for the Anatoly Makarenko, ex-head of the State Customs Service. Can we cooperate with you as we are opening the new program, the interfaculty one? We are the first in Ukraine to open the program on the preparation of experts from on the expert control of the double-use products. And it's also needed. Can you support us in that as well? Thank you. And as of, I do apologize, but I am the de-shadowing expert. So the main reason of the shadow business is bans and restrictions. That is why the competition is the only way out. We need to create the conditions, the favorable conditions, where we would all be competitive. That's it. But the bans and restrictions is the monopoly, just the reverse side of the competition. Thank you. So about the question number one, yes, this is not the only event, this is just the first event which is planned, and we are planning to several events, not only in Ukraine, but the essence is that what we do after the event, not the event itself, our resolutions, our opportunities on communications with the state officials and state authorities is the mechanism which we will use. As of the students, first of all, we've got the web broadcast and the recording of this event, so the students should listen to that at least. We can give you all the links. Secondly, we are proposing that every 3 months or every 6 months you should gather and create the summing up, the conclusion of what we've done, to create smaller presentations for the students, created for them to understand better, because some of the questions are rather professional for them. Maybe they don't understand everything. And as of our events, our next event will be in the Parliament of the UK on the 18th of June. And we want to collect information today and to present it to the politicians of the UK, to the government of the UK, to develop the cooperation. We consider that they need to be one of our key partners. And, of course, the United States and other countries of the European Union, for instance. Anatoly, what about your question? I'll try to be short. I would gladly cooperate with you. We'll share contacts because I am in close cooperation with your higher educational institutions, with the law department and other departments. We'll cooperate. As of your question, the export control. In 2000s, in the middle of 2000s, together with the American partners, we've created the system of export control in Ukraine. It used to be safety and security elements with weaponry and armament and so on. I was one of those who created this department on base of the Kiev customs, and using this opportunity because we have an American guest here and I'm trying to send some messages through him, this system is ruined already. The whole system of export control is ruined together with the Ukrainian customs. So the Department of Export Control existed as a separate department in the central one. The experts of export control in Kiev Customs were in every department of customs and they had special training with involvement of foreign experts. For today, the expert control in Ukraine is done at the highest level by two state officials, as well as the protection of the intellectual property. At the level of customs administrations, the protection of intellectual property and control is dealt by two state officials. This is the problem. I'm just using the opportunity. I'm making you aware about that. And one more point. I'm really grateful to Yuri and Anastasia for such a wonderful final of our round table. I was just listening, it was incredibly interesting. And you said a wonderful phrase, Sergei. After the speech of Yuri, you finally are inspired. So I'd like to applaud and to express my words of gratitude to this youth. We've got some future. Thank you. So, as a dominating moderator, I'll ask the question to Anatoly. Anatoly, listen to the speech of the head of the administration of the president. He said about the opportunity or the perspective to involve British companies to manage the customs. What do you think about that? In short, I am totally against that. The analysis of the involvement of this company and other companies to manage different customs offices. We've thought we analyzed Macedonia, Bulgaria, Mozambique, Angola, and it never brought to anything good. We are being deceived. It's not true. The experience is bad, so I totally mind that we should give the Ukrainian customs to the management of the foreign company. Let us give the security service to the foreign country, and it will be much more. But why? What was the negative? What were the drawbacks? In money, in money, to pay for the services of the foreign company, they lost more than they had the economic effect gained. Secondly, the people, the professionals of the foreign companies came and left, but the institutional memory for the system of management was lost. People were not trained. They were not training their own experts out of Bulgaria, for instance, experience. So please pay attention to that. We shouldn't invent the wheel in the customs activities. Let's go to the Poles, to Poland. To Poland, they used foreign investments, they used the experience of foreign experts and create their own European customs administrations. In 2004, we had the similar conditions at the beginning, but unfortunately we wasted our resources, but they used the resources. One more last questions, and then we have to finalize. No questions left. Then I'd like to thank all of you again, and I emphasize that this is just one event. We'll have some of the events and the expert work and the meetings and the discussions both at this platform and other platforms will involve Ukrainian associations and the Federation of Employees of Ukraine and other partners of ours. I'd like to thank you again and to say, we don't have any opportunity to explain why we are not developing economically. Even the elections have already taken place in a democratic way. Let us face it. We have the new president, the new team, but so we don't have excuses left. Let us change it finally, and let us be proud that we can achieve something. Our people are clever. Look at Yuri again, and our guests of ours who are developing under these conditions. The IT branch brings 4% of GDP under such complicated conditions. People should be proud of us, so let us all together not only rely upon the government, because when we go to the Maidan, to the revolution, let they do that. No, let us change our country together. I'd like again to thank all of you and meet you soon. Thank you.